All right, how to support your leader. That's what we're talking about today. Let's go.
You are watching the Beyond Sunday podcast.
All right, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about supporting your leader. We talked previously about knowing your leader's heart. And so now it's really kind of a little more nuts and bolts. Mm-hmm. We've thought about searching our leader's heart, trying to understand them. But now we're going to talk about how can I practically follow up every day, and actually be a good and positive support for our leader. So hit us. What's the first thing I can do to actually make that happen?
Okay, so I think one of the most important things, and you at times might feel like a broken record, but keep communication open no matter what.
Yep.
And at times it feels like you're over communicating. However, there's so much input going in to your leader's mind. They have so much going on, mm-hmm. and typically, at least for most of us, we're more focused on an individual thing. And
right.
They're looking at a much grander scope of realities. And so keep communication open. And again, it'll feel like you're over communicating at times, but we all want a leader that doesn't hover.
Fair.
Nobody likes the bumblebee leader that's like just chilling over your shoulder, like ready to sting at any moment. You want to feel like you have some some room to walk and to work at your own pace and all that stuff. And so your leader, I think, wants to be able to give that, but they also want to know from a production standpoint, are we moving?
Done.
Are we moving the needle here? And so it's super, super helpful to just check in, say, hey, this is what I'm working on. I got this done. And maybe, again, ask for some inputs and stuff like that.
Right.
But, just keep communication open.
And I think it's important. And as you think about it, every leader is a little bit different. So that what that level of communication looks like, a little trial and error, some experimentation on your part to figure that out. But I think, as over the years as I've interviewed people, most people say, I don't want a leader that hovers. I don't want to be micromanaged, magic word right there. If you want to solve that problem, one of the first things that's in your power to do is that communication piece. And, I think especially when there are things that a leader sends out in the world, you're like, check, I've got it off the list. Do they know that? Mm-hmm. As far as they know, they have no feedback loop that's told them, oh, we are still moving ahead.
Yeah.
So that closure, or if you're like, I can't close this out, we're like, well, I'll tell you when it's done. That is not helpful for a leader. So closing the loop just by going, hey, I ran into these things, but I'm doing this and this and this, so we should be good tomorrow. I think that that kind of feedback and that communication just is...
Yeah,
because the leader gets it. You checked it off, but now they get to check it off, and I think that's really huge. I think then the next thing we could look at besides communication is covering your leader, and hear me very carefully on this. I don't mean covering up for your leader, like they've done something wrong or anything else. What we're talking about here is really kind of the essence of supporting them. There's a training I went to a few years ago. I think it was a Pastor Jelani Lewis, if I remember right. Sorry if I've kind of messed that up or forgotten. But he was talking about covering your leader, and he used this illustration that the higher up the flagpole your leader climbs, so hang on for a minute. The higher up the leader climbs on the flagpole, the more exposed their butt is. Sorry. He explains this a lot better than I do. But,
I think you nailed it.
Yeah. As you climb higher and higher up that ladder, you're open to view, and people can see everything that you do wrong. When you're a little more sheltered, you're down kind of at the base, you don't have as much to go. But the higher up you go, you've got more things you're thinking about. You're operating at different levels. You're thinking forward. You're going to make mistakes as a leader. You're going to forget things. You're going to make missteps. We've talked about that before. So if you're supporting your leader well, help cover those things. Again, and I'm not talking about covering up. I'm saying, support. So scripturally, we could look at a place, like in Moses' case, Moses was trying to lead too many people, and people are waiting, things aren't happening. So his father-in-law comes and says, hey, what you're doing is not good. We need to diversify this. We need to get more people doing the job. So he appoints other judges and leaders. And, we even see that in the middle of battle, Moses, as long as he has his arms raised, they're victorious. The guy can't keep that up. And, but that's what, like we talked about before, we expect a little more perfection from the leader. If he can't keep that up, you got to lift his arms up a little bit. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think about like a really good example would be maybe a moment where, let's say I have somebody on my team, at whatever company I work at or whatever, and my boss has an engagement with that person, and has a frustration point. And let's say I am with my leader then in a closed room where they want to communicate something to somebody on my team. And the way that it's coming out is far too aggressive and not the best way to deliver.
Yeah, they've got their frustrations and everything else. Yeah.
But the reality is, in a safe, protective position of our leader, we all need a space where we can air some things out. And truly from a heartfelt position, they want to better an error or an issue or a challenge.
We want to make an improvement somewhere, sure.
And a way that we can protect is to listen well as they're sharing a frustration or a struggle or an issue, and then we're going to filter that, and we're going to go take care of it in a way that protects them. This person doesn't need to know
all the gritty details.
Because sometimes we expect avenues or rooms where we're allowed to vent, but we don't give the same grace to our leader.
What? No way.
Yeah. But I mean, at times it's really helpful, and we get to be a sounding board.
I think
and
that's
then
important.
We get to filter well. Okay, what needs to be communicated? Because I hear your frustration. I'm going to support you in this, but I'm not going to make you look bad in the same way. I'm going to protect you from that because
that's cool.
You have a way different perspective than what I'm carrying.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I remember reading several years ago was talking about the idea of how we respond. As leaders, we talk about things, we share things with our team, and we go, hey, here's what I think, and this is the values that we have. But one of the most important things, though, is how we respond. So, our team may sit there and look at things and hear us pontificate about values and leadership style and things. But when things kind of come to terms and they see us respond, that's the truth. And so I think there's a moment where when the leaders fumbled, when they're having a rough time, when they're falling down, which we all do, that as a leader myself, if I don't support that leader, my team's watching. And if I don't support my leader, then they're looking and probably thinking, well, why would I support you then?
Right.
I mean, that's not what we really do. And so, it's really demonstrating the kind of leadership that we want to see all throughout the organization.
We're creating a culture.
Fair. Yeah, that's exactly it. And, I think that's huge. Another thing that I think when I think about covering the leader, this one's super hard for me. I'm going to just admit it to all of you right now, is that there are those times when they're frustrated. They share that frustration. You get to be a good sounding board. But then as you take that, you're carrying some new weight on you didn't have before. And I think one of the things is not to go and grumble.
Yeah.
If I'm leaving and I'm going to help execute and I'm truly going to support the leader, I need not to grumble about this or say something like, hey, the boss said this, you know how it is. And, that can be really hard because I'm about to be the bearer of bad news and I don't want this to be my fault. I'd rather it was the boss's fault. So I'm going to share the information with you, but I'm going to let you know this isn't my fault. And if we really want to support a leader, I think the biggest thing that we can do is just go and not grumble and say, hey, here's what we're going to be doing. If you need to give some context because it matters in your organization, go, hey, the boss and I were talking as we were going through, we were discussing and we've decided this. Yeah. Own that. Be a part of this. If you're going to share information, own that. And I think that's huge for kind of that covering and supporting and going with your boss. So,
and again, I think that kind of, we talk a lot about this, but it's a humility thing.
Yeah.
Where it goes, I am not going to just sell out other people for my relief
Right.
and my benefit. In pursuit
But
of
I feel
trying
better
to be,
when I do.
Oh yeah, in pursuit of trying to be the favorite among all, you have a tendency to bash everybody else to,
Right,
to
yeah.
help lower them down so that you have a fighting chance to be the favorite.
Right. And when you think about that, think about how self-defeating it is. I want to be the
Yeah.
favorite. I want to be well-loved by everyone by tearing someone else down. What's the likelihood that that's not happening then back to you?
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, because everybody can see that you're faking this.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, and not to mention whoever it is that you're ripping down, you're not making friends here.
No.
This is, and again, it's gonna boil out and begin to have a ripple effect that creates a super hostile, uncomfortable culture that you do not want to
Right.
exist in
Right.
at all.
So yeah, and I think, probably another step that we can take is, we've talked previously about knowing your leader's heart in your moments of frustration as you're trying to support them. That's probably a next step is remember their heart. They have something that you believed in. When you interviewed, when you've talked with them, in your best moments, you're going, yeah, same team. I'm with you. I care about the vision. I care about what's going on in your life. And, if you need to, pause and just look back to the beginning and go, hey, I remember when we were in a good spot. Today I'm feeling a little bit rough. Mm-hmm. I don't want to support you right now, but I'm going to make the decision and go, yeah, no, I remember, we are on the same team. And it's that just reflective moment, I think, that helps out a good bit.
Yeah, and there's a big difference. I think it's healthy to remember that they're at, again, a different level than we are. There's most people have somebody above them,
right?
And each layer or level of a ladder that you step up, you begin taking on totally different amounts and levels of weight. And remembering all of the weight and streams that they have coming in at them helps you, one, I think, carry more grace for your leader.
Right.
But in support of them, knowing I don't have to handle all this, and you got way more coming at you.
Right.
And so I think it helps. Again, we talked about humanizing your leader in another episode, but this is the same thing. It kind of helps give the ability to support on another level.
Right.
Because we
fair.
remember this is where I'm at and this is where you're at. Not that you're better, but we have different responsibilities, different expectations, and more to steward ultimately.
Right. And I know I can forget that, as I'm feeling kind of my own pressures, my own weight, like I've got things that I'm doing. And then, if your leader comes down and goes, here's more. And you go, and you have this frustration and you kind of begin judging upward at them like, well, what are you doing? You can forget they've got other things that are going on.
Yeah.
You may not see the full picture. So we talked about filling the gap, trust versus suspicion. Put some trust in there. You're hopefully, your leader's got some good things going on. And if you find out different, that's another discussion. But start with trust at least, and assume that. And I think as you're navigating kind of through those interactions with your leader, one of the things that that I figured is the most helpful for me, and I talk about with our team and stuff, is what I call anticipatory leadership. So the leader's coming with things, and probably the most frustrating thing that most of us deal with is, the boss comes and has a new expectation, a new project, a new deadline, a new to-do that gets added in. And I would recommend just don't sit in this responsive place. I've been super guilty of that. One of the hardest leadership lessons I've had to learn is that, hey, I respond to everything you ask me to do. You can count on me to do that. But the thing is that, one, I'm going to get a little frustrated because you keep bringing stuff to me, and I'm delivering this, and sometimes it feels like, gosh, why are you always on my case? But it flips when you sit there and go, okay, I know who you are. I understand the vision. I'm with you on that. So now I'm going to start thinking forward. I wonder what you would want done next, and start trying to think ahead. And in working with leaders and things, I think there's almost nothing more that leaders appreciate than somebody, because keeping the communication open, like you said, you go, hey, by the way, I was thinking about this. And they're like, I haven't even told you to do that yet. Wow, it's on my heart and mind. But wow, I'm glad you're thinking about that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're already working on that. And you get to open the door instead of just being on the, hey, I'm here whenever you need me.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm leading this forward.
Yeah, and most times you can always pick up on it because our leaders most times are talking about the things that they're thinking about. And so if you'll pay attention and listen, then we can actually plug into this anticipatory leadership way better and way more effectively. And I'm just saying, nothing for nothing, I'll score you some serious brownie points with your leader.
Right.
Typically, when we sit in the position of I respond every time you ask, what tends to follow is we usually grouse every time they come and ask something.
If we're honest,
Yeah, we sit there and they approach us with an idea or, like you said, a new project or whatever, and we go, okay. And we'll go do it.
I've made that face.
And I'm waiting for you to tell me what to do. And it's like, let's just go do it.
Right.
I think I know where you're going with this. So I'm gonna jump a couple steps ahead of you, or really not ahead of them, but maybe ahead of their conversation with you to do it. And when they go and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, you're like, boom, point for me. I knew you were.
Right.
Check this out. I've already started this.
Right. And like we've talked about a number of times in dealing with leadership and things like that, pay attention. The leader says something once, put your ear to the ground and think about that. The second time you hear from your leader, start thinking real hard about that. Because, when you think about that, it's not just something that's passed through their mind, it's churning in there. It's working in their mind. That second time they're expressing it out loud, there's a desire to make something real.
Yep.
And now that doesn't mean go ahead and execute, do all the things, get way too far ahead of them, but join them and get up in that. Because, think about this. We talked about, their responsibilities, all the things that they have going on. Hey, I've got my own thing. But imagine if from the leader's perspective, in order to move the organization, I now have to stop and think about on my to-do list is to create all the jobs for all the people today. And now I've got to tell everybody what to do. My job just got twice as big because now I'm pushing all the work down. And really, far too often, that's what leaders end up doing. How much of a relief is it for your leader? How much of a burden do they feel lifted off when you go, hey, I was thinking about something you said the other day. I was wondering if we could go in this direction. You could end up having a great conversation. And instead of just being someone who completes work, the leader now sees somebody who's invested in what they're thinking, what they're doing, and trying to help move them forward. And that's huge.
And I think I read a book called Courageous Leadership.
Right.
And one of the principles that it talks about is this idea of 360-degree leadership.
Okay. Yep.
And the moments where we lead our peers to the side, and then we lead the people that are below us, but then North leadership is where we lead our leaders.
Okay, yeah.
And I think this anticipatory leadership kind of is a huge piece of North leadership, where we begin actually leading our leader by having things prepared far beyond, because we've been paying attention and we've been really tuning in. And so we begin leading them, and what can happen is we're creating even more like kind of synergy as a team, and everything can clip along at a much better pace. You gain momentum, you gain productivity. All of this can follow if we are processing through leading upward. Exactly.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting things I remember in reading that the different levels of leadership, that one of them is self-leadership, leading yourself. Yeah. And 50%, I never would have thought this. I would have thought in each direction. So as a leader, I'm going to spend half or more of my time in how I lead my team. And but yet it flips it on its head and it says, actually, half your time is leading yourself. And if you're spending a lot of time being a good leader to yourself, challenging yourself, encouraging, moving yourself forward, it's going to make that upward piece so much easier. So, as we're looking, we've given a lot of just kind of general guidelines on how we can support our leader. What happens if we still disagree? How am I going to navigate that? What are your thoughts there?
Don't let the door smack you where the good Lord cracked you, No.
That is wildly unhelpful. I'm
know.
just going to don't listen to that. Seriously.
Disagreement is going to happen.
Yep.
and sometimes a lot, and you have to be able to navigate that.
Yeah.
One, it's I always encourage people, and I try and remind myself, okay, let's cover all of this again as a Christ follower, which is my lens. I'm going to cover all of this in humility.
Okay.
So
that's fair.
I'm gonna always, in a disagreement, I'm gonna take a position of humility. I'm not gonna just lean over and let whatever happen. But
No.
But you begin making decisions at each point.
Okay.
Whether there's a disagreement, there are small disagreements where I just prefer something different than you.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I get that.
And those are sometimes pretty easy to navigate, and
right.
those are far more often probably where we would have just a different direction or preference on moving forward.
Yeah. It's important to admit that it is a preference.
Yeah. And so I like it this way instead of this way,
Yeah.
but my leader said this way. But we make a decision, and obviously those decisions get more and more weighty when it begins to call into question, morals maybe.
Okay. Yep.
But I think we make a decision every time there's a disagreement on what do I do from here.
Okay.
And so we have to be able to process and think through the reality of the whole scope.
Right.
What are you asking me to do? Does it go against any of my fundamental beliefs or morals?
That's fair.
That's a different thing. I think you actually are potentially looking at a separation at that moment.
Okay, that's
from
pretty
your
severe
boss. And I'm talking probably more
Worst
weighty
case, yeah,
things for sure. But there are transactions when we're asked to do certain things that go against what we desire, maybe.
Okay.
And we take every one of these into account, and we either have to accept it and say, you're still worth following. I'm still going to do this, and I'm going to walk forward, and it doesn't do us any good to hold on to it. We have to be able to fully process this disagreement or challenge and truly move on. But at some point, as they begin to feel like they pile up over time, there's charges on loyalty potentially. There's all kinds of relational charges or withdrawals maybe that happen.
Yeah.
And so I think we have some decisions to make at each head in the road.
Well, and I think as you kind of started us off, the idea of communication, I think, as we disagree, we might want the leader to own a bigger responsibility to fix that disagreement, but self-leadership is the key. So if self-leadership is one of our biggest investments, well, if I'm seeing it, then I need to start by communicating more. And the easiest way to do that is start asking questions. Hey, do I actually understand you right? Are you saying this? Let me ask you why you're heading that way. Those can be very scary and honestly dangerous questions because, you're opening yourself up. And if you already feel tense, this is an awkward situation or a pretty intense situation, I could open up for even deeper things. But again, if you're going to have to make decisions on this and you're going to have to figure out how do I move forward, you might as well have the best information and, start from well-founded, good information as you try and figure out how to navigate forward.
And asking good questions, you know, it matters so much. All these little things are so important. And as we kind of press into them, they can make or break cultures if we decide to engage or not engage, or engage in a good way or a bad or inappropriate way. And it's really difficult. It's super hard to do. But again, it's so worth it to challenge yourself to support the people who are above you, who are your leaders, because ultimately they want to support you too. But there's a real thing that happens when both of us know, I got your back.
Yep.
And again, like you said earlier, we're not talking about covering up for your leader.
Right. No.
Very different than just supporting and covering your leader.
I think it's fair.
And so it's challenging and it's difficult, but I encourage each of you, and myself included, to continue to push into that and support your leader as best as we can always. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
This has been another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe.